Welcome back. I'm Captain Xavier, and this video is one that I'm sure you've all been waiting for. This is EIR's internals. I'm going to start with the battery housing, because that's where it all begins, really, with the power. EIR has 4 electrical channels. One for the main gun, one for the Titan's automated pump, one for the ammo counter, and one for the UV LED. She also has redundant power for the main gun. Looking here in the battery pack, the 3 AAAs powers the ammo counter, a single ultrafire powers the UV LED, 4 ultrafires power the front pump, and 4 IMRs power the main gun, with redundant power in the form of 4 trust fires. I know everybody hates trust fires, but I used trust fires in EIR for many years and never had a problem. I upgraded to IMRs, and I definitely intend to get more to replace the redundant power. Main power also has the option of adding another set of 4 batteries in parallel to double the battery life. The switch in order to toggle between main power and backup power is here on the back of the gun. I do plan to replace both these with IMRs and get another set of IMRs to go in here. These ones I will probably leave because they're not drawing nearly enough current for it to ever be a problem. There is also a jack on the back of the gun, which connects to this set of plugs, which could be plugged into the backup power instead of a battery pack, and then allow you to plug a power source in from outside of the gun into the back, should that ever come up. It hasn't yet. It would also actually allow me to plug this into one of the battery packs and power something external from a battery pack inside the gun. Again, that hasn't come up, but I had this hole in the back from an attempt to make a externally rechargeable system that didn't work out, so I had the hole there and figured I might as well do something with it. I believe that is all that's going on in the battery housing. If you have any questions or comments, or are just absolutely horrified by something I've done, feel free to put it in the comments below. I have considered going to LiPo, but the Stampede really doesn't benefit as much as the flywheel guns do, and there usually is ridiculous amounts of room in a Stampede's battery housing, but I've managed to fill it with things. So I needed the different voltages for the different devices, and this was the easiest way to do it. On the back side are the leads for all of the various currents, because they all have to have their own circuit. On the inside of the gun is, of course, the opposite of that. These are where all of the different circuits go to. The bottom one is the UV LED, the next one is the main gun, then the, I believe the ammo counter, and then the top one is the front pump. I could have the last 2 confused, but it doesn't really matter. So, let's start with the main gun. The main gun, at this point, I recently upgraded it. I've upgraded it since I did the video with Wallcom. I increased the main spring, something that was previously in the battery housing that is no longer in there. I used to have a volt regulator. The 4 IMRs pump out around 16.4 volts when fully charged, and that was too much for the spring that I had in the gun, and I was having issues with it running away. I didn't want to put in the full 8K spring, because then you start running into issues with the gearbox shearing off gears. I don't actually know what the weight was on the previous upgrade spring that I had in here. I bought it from a friend. It worked beautifully for years, never had a problem. Then I finally upped the voltage with IMRs and started having runaway issues, so I did some research. Thanks to Alex at Storm Rage for EVA, that's his YouTube channel, and Aeromech's YouTube channel. I found videos on how to do some upgrades. I then did some additional research. In the end, what I ended up doing was putting in a Orange ModWorks 4K spring, as well as a stock Stampede 2K spring to bring it up to 6K. I then still was having runaway issues at around 16 volts. At 15.5 it was fine, but at 16 it was running away again. So I did a little more research and found out that there were a number of things that you could upgrade. The spring on the trigger mechanism for the switch, that can get upgraded, and that supposedly helped, and that did help a little, but not entirely. I then ended up upgrading pretty much every spring in the thing. I doubled up on the bolt return spring. I replaced the catch spring, and I replaced the catch release return spring. And once I did all three of those, I have not had any trouble with runaway at all. The gun has a little bit more kick, and I like that. It's got a much beefier action when it actually fires. It seems to fire harder, and I haven't had any problems with the gearbox yet. We'll see what happens in the future. I have put more stress on the system, so it will, I assume, wear out a little bit faster, but we'll get to that when it comes to that. So that's EIR's functional mechanism. Something that those of you that have ever messed with a Stampede will know, the power switch is actually on the far side of the gun, on the other side of the shell, which is annoying because you have to undo it or your shell is hanging off. I went ahead and put in a socket that allows me to just unplug the other side of the gun. I then went ahead and did this for a number of other devices, other parts of the gun as well. The voltmeter is also removable, and it may have to during the course of my upgrades. I think I may have shorted it out. It is still working, but it's making a squealing noise and giving off the smell of burning circuitry. So I've ordered a new one. Hopefully it will fit as well as that one did. If not, I'll have to keep looking until I find one that does. The main gun is also, the main functional drive system is also completely removable just by unplugging it here. In the case that I end up having to replace all of that for whatever reason. And then the motor in the front is also removable. I have removed all of the locks, all of the magazine locks, as well as the jam door lock. The jam door switch is still up there in order to, lock it in place. But I removed the magazine clips, or magazine safeties, because I wanted the magazine to drop out. This safety is still in place and is still functional because I don't like dry firing a gun. I believe that is everything to do with the main system. I'm going to take it apart a little bit further now so that you can see all the wiring for the aftermarket stuff that I have put in. The first major integration that I added to EIR was, of course, the Titan. The Titan was not the first underslung attachment I made, but it was the first one that involved any internal modification. The other one was just a rail-to-rail Maverick that you can see in the external video. I got a hold of a Titan on eBay. This is just ABS plastic that I wrapped over it to make it look better so it wasn't white. There's then a section that's the barrel. I've added tack rail to either side. There's then a screw and washer that hold it up front. Part of the original body that is adding a little more structure here. And then a bit of metal that I have cut, fit in under the plastic, and attached to one of the screw pegs that's holding it there. The tube for the pressure goes in here, goes through to the far side of the blaster, coming out on this side, and previously just went straight to the pump, and that was it. But now it's got a T-joint right here that goes back inside to the electronic pump. And it works beautifully. I don't have any problems with leaking. The trigger mechanism has then been slightly modified to fit into this section of the rail, which is quite lovely in how well that fit. And then this is part of the original trigger that I cut a groove for, and it just hooks to right there and pulls the release. The first electronic update that I put into EIR, other than voltage modifications, was the UV LED that I put in order to light up glow-in-the-dark rounds. I liked glow-in-the-dark rounds because I did a lot of HVZ at night, and basically having them act as tracers was very, very handy. One, for finding them. Two, for plausible deniability, keeping zombies from claiming they didn't get hit. It's really easy to tell when the little beam of light went right into your chest. I had been using the Firefly magazines from the Ravens, but I didn't like them. They took up too much room in mag pouches because the battery pack is built into the magazine, and so it takes up more room. It also makes them more heavy because each of them has 3 or 4 AA's in it. Adds up quickly. I didn't have very many of them either, and I couldn't tell how many rounds I had left. At the time, I didn't have an ammo counter. So I wanted to use clear magazines and add a UV LED into the gun. The first one I had was actually mounted just right up in here, but they weren't ultraviolet. They didn't work very well. They only kind of lit up half the darts. So a friend of mine gave me this UV LED, and I discovered it worked much, much better. It lit the darts up much faster. I could shoot full auto, and they would come out fully charged, especially when I got fully clear magazines, when the Rapid Strike came out, and we could get full clear magazines instead of just the half clears. The electrical line is fairly simple. It runs from the battery mounts here, one of these this red line and one of these black lines, goes to the switch that's mounted near the carrying handle, and then go on over to the LED. Very simple system. Lights up the rounds, works beautifully. The next thing I then added, I got from the same guy, was the compressor pump. EIR usually pumps up using a bike pump, but I decided he got me this compressor pump. I discovered it would in fact give enough pressure to a Titan tank to fire. Not as much pressure as the manual pump gives, but definitely enough, and it's better actually if you're shooting at close quarters anyway. If you're shooting the absolvers, it's better to use the pump, but for singled shots, this pump is perfectly sufficient. It is also wired to be easily removed. It's got a socket that can just be unplugged in case I need to replace that motor someday. It happened to fit in fairly well. I had to do a little bit of grinding and cutting to fit it in. Its switch is on the far side of the gun, near the Titan's grenade or trigger, and it just flips the switch and the little pump just goes to town and fills up the tank. You can hear as it starts getting more and more pressure, it starts to speed up a little bit, and then it fires. The wiring for it starts all the way back here with one of the mounts, of course, runs along underneath the trigger system and all of that, and is then this red and black line going in through the superstructure, where I Dremeled out holes so I could run the wires along the side of the gun, and then right up into here to the switch, and then goes into the main pump. I then added both the ammo counter and the voltmeter at the same time as part of a massive upgrade. I ended up replacing most of EIR's internals, cleaning them out, greasing them up, getting everything all skookum, redid most of the wiring that was previously in there. The voltmeter is actually fairly simple. It just is wired into the main power in parallel to the blaster, obviously. Wiring goes again through the superstructure and is removable from a jack, goes in right here, and lights up when you turn the gun on, and gives you the voltage of the battery. But like I said, I think I damaged it when I was doing the most recent upgrades, because I got some wires crossed, and I think I may have blown it up. It still works and still reads, but it's definitely not long for this world. Finally, and the most complicated bit of electronics, was the ammo counter. This was a commission made for me by, I believe, Dustin Westaby at westaby.net. I will put the link in the comments below, and it is absolutely genius. The entire circuit is the size of the display itself. It's slightly bigger. He programs everything in and then solders it all on, so you can't reprogram it. Which is a shame, because there's a couple of... I would have done it a little bit differently as far as the options of ammo counts, because I really never intend to put a 6-round magazine in this, but that's function 1. I would have preferred to have 10, 12, 15, 18, 25, 35, but now of course they've got 20s and 22s, so that's why I've got the external decrement, so I can switch it manually if I feel like it. But it is absolutely minuscule. The size of it is absolutely brilliant. You could integrate it into just about any blaster because of how small it is. I wanted it mounted right here in the back. The other place people often will mount it is up here, but I didn't like it there. I wanted it further back, which required me to make this housing for it out of plastic, Just cut it out, shaped it out, filed it out, mounted it. Mounts beautifully. This here is a piece of metal that protects it from the catch, the bolt, when it fires, because it has enough recoil. It was catching things, and it was very bad. It then has 6 wires coming off of it. Power, positive and negative, and then the switches for reset and decrement. And though the power, of course, goes over to the switch for it, which is right here, underneath the sling mount that I don't ever use. You can see when it's on. The wires then go up along the top under that same thing, that the same bit of covering for the UV LED. One of the red and blacks coming over here then is the power that goes over to the battery housing. And then the green and blacks that are coming out all the way over here are the switches. I used a rigid wire rather than a fibrous wire, so it's not very flexible, and so it won't bend and get caught on the bolt as it's going back and forth. I haven't had any problem with it at all so far. The green and black then go under the motor, the primary motor, underneath the trigger assembly, and then across here. The lower one is reset, the upper one is decrement, which is then spliced into this switch, so that when the gun fires and the bolt goes forward, it flips the switch and decrements the gun with every firing of the blaster. It then goes all the way up to the two buttons that are in front for the reset and the external decrement. The external decrement is much more recessed. It's difficult to press on accident, by design, of course. Let's see if you can even see them. They're black on a black background. There they are. So the upper one is decrement, the lower one is reset, and this is the motor pump. And then just so you have, because I didn't show it earlier, this is the switch for the UV LED. The final thing that I added most recently was the secondary trigger. Most people, when they first see it, mistake it for a rev trigger. This is in fact the trigger that fires my shoulder cannon, or could technically fire anything that I decided to make remotely fired or wire fire, depending on how I set it up. But this is just a secondary trigger that activates essentially this jack on the back, which is 3.5mm audio jack. It simply completes a circuit. So anything that I decided to jack into here that just needed to have a simple button to fire, my shoulder cannon, landmines, audio, whatever I wanted to plug into this, it could then fire it. It's wired along the same line as the voltmeter, goes underneath to the switch, and then goes up and underneath to the safety switch right here, which activates or deactivates this trigger. I realized it would be very easy to accidentally fire the shoulder cannon with the trigger right here, just from, squeezing it or bumping it. So I put in a safety that I can reach with my trigger finger, because I'm left-handed. Pushing it forward activates it, flipping it back turns it off. So that is how that one works. And that should be just about it for the internals of EIR. If you have any questions or any suggestions for additional features, one thing I am considering adding, and I'm not sure exactly which circuit I would wire it up on because I don't want to try to add a whole nother circuit, is to put some LEDs up here in the front of the barrel and replace the very tip of the barrel with some clear red and create muzzle flash. I saw that on the Hellhound, which is a gorgeous blaster, and you should all go take a look at it. It gave me a couple of ideas of things I want to do for integrations, but I would love to try to add muzzle flash to EIR, and I think it could be easily done with LEDs. I'm not sure which circuit I would use. Probably the UV LED circuit, because it's got 3.5 volts or so, which should be more than enough to power several LEDs, and it doesn't get a whole lot of use because I only use the UV LED at night. And only if I'm actually running glow-in-the-dark rounds. So, If you have any suggestions or comments or things that you think I'm doing wrong or things you think I could do better or ideas for things I could add, please leave them in the comments below. And thank you for watching.